Right. Hello, everybody. So, our question for today, what even the heck is philosophy, right? Here are some philosophers, different people from many different eras, and they all give different reasons for different kinds of claims, right? But they're all philosophers. So, what is it that makes all of these people philosophers? So, I think that we're just going to jump right into uh, some definitions, right? So these are three definitions for philosophy, experimental sciences, and revealed theology, right? So by revealed theology here, we mean studying the nature of God by way of divine revelation, right? Um, So I think it will help it will help us understand philosophy more by comparing it and contrasting it to these other two disciplines, right? Also, note that these definitions are all highly controversial, right? So not all philosophers are going to agree to this definition of philosophy, right? So first, this first definition here, right, is the definition of science. So we're talking about the rational and disciplined pursuit of knowledge, right? So notice that all three of these definitions have that as their common element, right? So we're talking about the pursuit of knowledge. All three of these things claim to give us knowledge. Okay, of what? Of physical reality, insofar as it can be quantitatively measured by means of natural reason alone, right? And then the method by which we do so is controlled experiments, technologies, measurements, and so on, right? So important to claim there is that we are attempting to know different parts of physical reality by means of reason alone, right? Okay. So science claims to get us knowledge of what? Of physical reality by way of reason alone and by way of experimentation, right? Okay. Um, Now, the second definition is the definition of philosophy, right? So all of the colors here are the things that are similar between these definitions. So philosophy, like science and like revealed theology, is the rational and disciplined pursuit of knowledge. Now, of what? Of the ultimately real, the good, and the beautiful, right? Maybe we can add a couple of things there, but the ultimately real, that has to do with questions like what is knowledge, what is form, right? We're going to get a whole lot of that in these ancient Greek philosophers coming up. Um, that identifies metaphysics, right? So metaphysics is the study of ultimate reality, right? And just like the relations between, like how we understand the relationship between, say, parts and their wholes, right? That's a philosophical question, right? um like how many parts do you have to take off of a car before it no longer is a car? That is a philosophical question technically, because you're asking about the relation between parts and wholes. Like that's not something that you can do a science experiment and figure out how, right? Okay, so we're talking about the rational and disciplined pursuit of knowledge, of ultimate reality, the good, which is ethics, and the beautiful, which is aesthetics, right? By how? How are we going to do that? By means of natural reason alone, right? So, like science, philosophers are focused on using only what we have in our human rational capacities to figure out things about the good and the true and the beautiful and the ultimately real. Um, and so, how are we going to do that, right? More specifically, by means of argument, conceptual analysis, reflection, uh, testimony, experience, and stuff from the sciences, right? So, science does bear on philosophy in a lot of ways. And so, here, basically, our toolkit for coming to knowledge in philosophy is argument, reflection, conceptual analysis, right? We're going to be looking at arguments that claim to tell us something about reality, right? In this class, we're going to assess those arguments. We're going to reflect upon them, and we're going to analyze the concepts that are there. We're going to ask them if whether or not those are good concepts. Okay, lastly, there's revealed theology. And like science and philosophy, this is the rational and disciplined pursuit of knowledge of what? Of the ultimately real, the good, and the beautiful. So notice that the subject of study is the same as philosophy, right? Theology is after the very same kinds of claims that philosophy is after. Now, this is where they're different. How is it that the theologian comes to knowledge about the good, the ultimately real, and the beautiful? It is by way of divine revelation, right? The interpretation of which is aided by reflection upon work of theologians in the past or holy scriptures and things like this. And she also uses argumentation, the work of philosophy, data from the sciences, right? That's where there's some commonality between philosophy and theology, right? So the idea here is that the theologian is going to rest her case on theologically revealed claims, right? Whereas the philosopher is not going to do that. So the idea here is that when somebody asks you, well, what is philosophy? You say, look, it's the rational and disciplined pursuit of knowledge, right? About what? About things like what is good, what is right? How do we live a good life? What does ultimate reality look like? What is beauty, right? All of those kinds of questions. And we get answers to those questions or come to conclusions about those questions by means of natural reason alone. So we're not depending on what God tells us what beauty is, right? We don't depend on what God tells us what is good or what is right? Or what a good life looks like. Rather, we figure out the answers to those questions on our own, right? Okay, so um, this little lecture has been on philosophy, theology, and science, and looking at some of the commonalities between those disciplines. And it's all color-coded here for your convenience.